All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Slow Pitch. And I see Lane on the other side there. Lane, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And so I understand we have another letter today that we're going to go through.
We do. Yeah, it's a little bit longer, so we're going to paraphrase a little bit, but we'll definitely get through that.
All right, cool. What do we got?
So Jimmy wrote in with a question about a new client he's been working with and whether or not he should lie to his client.
As a salesperson, lie?
Yeah, to close the sale. Should he lie?
Oh, boy. Okay, here we go. Let's go.
You're listening to the Slow Pitch Podcast, a podcast about selling less and closing more.
All right. So you said we have a letter or an email, I guess. I always call it a letter, but it's an email that came in. And
yeah, you're old school like that. I know.
Well, that's what I would do. I would write somebody, I'd find the address, get a little paper envelope and write it all out. No, okay. So you got an email that says something about lying. So tell me, what does it say?
Yeah, so Jimmy wrote. So basically, Jimmy's saying that he's a sales rep, and he's responsible for sourcing and closing new business in a fairly niche sector. And he's been working with a good sized client for a few months. And if this deal closes, it would be really good for him. Great news.
Yeah.
His sales manager has been closely involved, but Jimmy's the one that's been doing all the work and building the trust of the client. So they sent over a new contract, and the prospect came back with a sticking point. There's a specific issue they have that they want an out for, and they're asking, if this particular issue happens, can I get out of this deal? So Jimmy goes back, does all his homework, checks with his sales manager, and finds out legally, technically, no, the client is stuck. But the sales manager wants Jimmy to tell the client, yeah, absolutely, you'll be able to cancel the contract, no problem.
Oh, my goodness. His
thinking being that it's very low risk, that virtually no chance of that particular scenario happening. So Jimmy's asking, what do I do here? Do I tell the truth and risk getting on my sales manager's bad side? Or do I tell the prospect the truth?
That is interesting. I can't imagine that ever happening out there in the real world. Do you?
Oh, no, never. I've never heard of such a scenario.
No, I've never heard of a manager or anybody that sales that's lied. I mean, first of all, does that ever happen? Anybody sales or not? No. I mean, what is your gut really? What is your gut telling you?
I can understand logically. I can understand where the sales manager is coming from.
Right.
This is such a slim chance of this ever happening. Just tell him, yeah, he's going to be able to get out of it. We want the money.
Yep.
But at the same time, man, that's a dangerous road to go down. I just can't imagine lying to any of my clients like that.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this. If I was Jimmy, I have the choice of starting off a relationship, signed contract relationship, because that's what you're starting, right? You start your relationship on a lie. How do you think that's going to go fast forward when something bad happens and they find out they can't get out of that? And I think we all know it inherently that if that goes sideways, and even though the risk is really low, what is that going to look like? One thing, obviously, who was the potential client now, but the client then will be really upset and really frustrated, probably get legal involved and try to find a loophole anyway, right? That's what they're going to do. And then fast forward that same time frame on your side, how do you feel as a salesperson? Like, just imagine if you're in that position, fast forward, you've completely forgotten about it, and you've now been revisited, and you find out, oh no, that just caught up with me.
Yep.
If you're the manager and you're being confronted by this client, what do you think the easiest out for the manager is?
Oh, well, I told him to tell you couldn't get out of it. He lied to you. It's his fault.
And what's the next level of that on top of that?
I don't know. What are you thinking?
Well, what if the manager was like, I am so frustrated by this. Jimmy can't work here anymore. We got to fire him because he lied. And that's a serious lie. This is a lot of money. You guys paid us a lot of money. And if I fired him, will that make things right with you guys? Oh,
well, the second it goes legal, Jimmy's fired anyways. So,
well, sure. But it's really interesting. There's a lot of scenarios that could play out. And I think just how you would feel inside having done that, just the one time is bad enough. But if you've been told to do that and you've got other jobs that are potentially big ones, what's going to stop you then once you've done it once and you've not gotten into trouble, you've not gotten caught? So there could be several times where you've gotten into the situation and you just don't even know how many times you're going to get caught yet and when it's going to happen. That's the first feeling that I have, is like, well, that's not good for anybody any way around. I think the real question comes out of this is, when a potential buyer asks you a question like that, what is the real question here? What's going on?
Clearly, there's some risk that they can see in going down this road, and they want to make sure they can minimize that.
Yeah, they're seeing something. and we don't know what it is yet, right?
Yep.
To me, I think if I was Jimmy, I would offer, let me do some checking to find out, but I'm kind of curious. I mean, maybe we just quick role play it. Let's say I'm Jimmy and you're the client, and you told me, hey, I want to get out of this agreement if I need to, if this situation comes up. Maybe I just ask the question back. That's a very interesting question. I can do some research on. I'm just kind of curious. Why did you ask about that? What happened, and what do you have to do?
Yeah, that's interesting. Not knowing the exactly what they're worried about, it makes it a little more difficult. But you can dream up all sorts of scenarios where you got to sit back and really think about that. Okay, well, what is my risk? Why am I asking about this? What's my exposure? So
yeah, and I think to me, anytime that I've had a situation like this come up before, and I'm not saying I don't get people asking me this type of question very often, but if there's something similar like that, where it's kind of like boy, this could go either. I don't even know what they're asking me here because this is a really weird question, but it's also got a lot of weight to it. If I ask that question back, that's an interesting question. What's making you ask that right now? I know we're to that point where you have to sign it, but what would be the reason? What happened? Like you must have something, must be a reason you're asking me that. And every time they'll say the last company that I worked with, and this is what happened. And whatever that scenario is that Jimmy ran into, he's going to fight against that. Whether you like it or not, he's up against the battle with whatever happened with that last company. So what Jimmy needs to do is understand that it's not a whether or not they can get out. It's a trust thing on top of it. And I think Jimmy needs to understand, I need to figure out what is the real reason they're asking me that question. So if I ask the question, why did you ask me? And they come back with my previous company that I worked with, they did X, Y, and Z, and they got in trouble and we needed to get out and blah, 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 whatever that reason was. Then a real quick and easy question back would be, once they tell you that, it's like, okay, how likely is that, do you think, to happen again? I mean, the warning signs now. You've been through it. What makes you feel like that's something we're going to do? I mean, we've run into this where other people have had this problem before, so I get it. I know where you're coming from. I've seen it. We've had to fix problems like this. So help me understand why do you see this happening with us, and make them explain it. And what happens then is they go, I don't see it. I just ask it. I'm just curious.
Yeah. And I guess ultimately, if it's that big of an issue for them, maybe that gives you an opportunity to say, okay, well, assuming you haven't talked pricing in too much depth, you can say, okay, well, maybe if we had 3% margin, maybe that's enough risk for us to take to give them the out in the contract.
Yeah. You have that option obviously as well. But I think what happens, it's also kind of interesting is that when they get to that point of, I was just asking, I'm just curious, it's done. Because then you can just go, oh, okay. And what other questions do you have? And they move on. That seemed to be a sticking point, and then it becomes not a sticking point, because when you ask a few more questions, like what made you think this, or what made you see this, or why do you see this coming? Have you had this happen before? Tell me about it. What happened? That kind of thing. Once they know that you've heard them and you've listened to what their problem was, and if you can respond with such a way that says, I get it, I understand. The other last option you can always use is, all right, let's just pretend I can't do anything about it. There's no way of getting out of that. That's the way it is. What happens now?
Yeah.
And then their option is to say, well, then we're not doing business. But if they've gone through all the time and effort to get to this point, they're likely not going to say that. They may just go, it's probably fine. We'll be fine. We'll deal with it then. That's usually what ends up happening. It's really weird. I don't know why, but just by asking the question and then answering and listening to making sure you understand what they're saying. And if I was Jimmy, I would be writing that in a note in their folder, file, whatever you want to call it, in the system that you have, so that everybody understands these people have been burned. They're going to be very critical up front. So we're going to need to handhold. We're going to need to make sure they're ready. They need to make sure they're understanding of what's going on, and they're comfortable moving to the next step every step of the way in the very beginning. Once they get past that, they're going to go, you guys are fantastic, way better than we've ever had to deal with before. And that starts to relieve that feeling of discomfort that they may have in the very beginning of your process. So especially once they sign the contract. So just understand that, asking a couple of critical questions at that moment, you have to be ready for that question to come up at any time, because if you're not prepared, it'll surprise you and you're not sure what to say. But weird questions come up so often that I buy time by asking the question, well, that's interesting. I've never had anybody ask me that question. Tell me what's going on with that. And it just buys me time, because I'm like, what the heck? Where did this come from? And now I've got time to think a little bit, but they're explaining themselves even more, because I thought I needed to answer question A, but it was actually question C that I had no idea what they were asking. So those questions back make a huge difference. And what was the other thing that you think that Lane, that he did wrong right in the middle of that whole paragraph that you read there? Is there anything that you saw that was glaring to you?
He went back to a sales manager.
Well,
Kidding.
the sales manager is obviously never helpful, right? But if you're a salesperson, you have a sales manager. Most times they don't look at it that way. Is that they're very helpful. But the other question you could ask, and I don't find this to be quite as effective, but hey, I went back, did the research. I asked the sales manager, what do you think my boss said when they got that question, and what do you think their response would have been?
That's interesting. We throw it back at the client.
Yeah, because I mean, what if the client goes, well, they're probably not very happy. Why do you think they weren't very happy? Well, I mean, here you got somebody that's getting ready to sign, and all of a sudden they want a way out. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Are we actually close or not? Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other thing is you follow that up with, listen, it's nothing major or nothing bad. Here's the thing, though, we have to decide whether or not we want to work with clients that it's a trust thing. It's a trust on both sides. And so I get where you're coming from, and we're going to work really hard to make sure we don't lose that trust from you. That's what we do, but we also have it to have the other way. And so if you're not comfortable, I don't want to push. I do not want to push you into this. This is your decision, 100%. And by doing that, you're forcing them to make the decision. And if you're out of their way, which is what you're doing, you're getting out of their way for making that decision. Their logical or their fastest answer is usually going to be, it's fine. We'll find. Let's just go forward. And then at that point, you should be asking, are you sure? Because I'm serious. I don't want to, because you want to make sure that they're very solid. They're not just saying it just to get you off their back, right?
Yeah.
It's really about getting out of their way from making the decision and giving them the out. Anybody out there? I mean, you have a cat, Lane, right? You have a cat.
Yep.
And what happens if you try to go after the cat to give it its medicine or give it some, go grab the cat to put it in the cage to bring it to the vet?
Oh yeah.
They run away.
That ain't happen. Yep.
Yeah. They just like, no, I don't want to do that. But if you sit down, guess who comes to you? The cat. That's what the clients are like, or potential clients are like. You have to think of it as they have to come to you, let them work through their process, asking the questions, work them through it, let them make their decision, because you're not going to force the decision. Anytime you think you're going to force their decision, you lost it. That's the simplest way I can put it. That's how I look at it. But also in the middle of that whole conversation, I think that they wrote out, they sent them the email with a contract. And that should have been a conversation that they had in person, right?
Yeah. Yep. So I kind of thought that's where you were going to go when you asked me what they did wrong. Oh, well, they sent over a contract.
Yeah, that's where you can work out some of those questions, because they'll ask those questions then, versus now they've read the contract and now you're like caught off guard and you're not quite ready to answer that question. But if you walked in with that document, the likelihood of that coming up during that presentation, if you will, while you're talking together, particularly when you walk in with the attitude of, all right, when we get through this presentation or this information, we're looking to try to make some decision one way or the other. Either you're going to tell me, hey, this is not a deal, and that's okay. Or you're going to tell me this is going to be a deal, and here's what we're doing next. Whether it's we need to process it through this, we need to get you your insurance set up, whatever that might be. All those things have to happen first. Fine, we all know our next steps, but without that wouldn't happen if you're just emailing it in, and that should never happen. But we've talked about that, but not everybody seems to know that. I wish we had more people that would catch on to that. It just doesn't seem to catch on. I don't know why. I think that was pretty straightforward, and I think that was one of those questions that got a lot of complicated answers, a lot of moving parts to it, and things that you could do a whole bunch of different things with. But I think the simplest one is to keep that in the client's hands. That's their problem, not yours. And don't take on somebody else's problem, right? And if you can do that and let them work through it, you have to think of yourself as kind of like, if you ever go to a psychologist or a therapist, you have a problem and you start asking them what to do. What do they ask you back?
Yeah, they just ask you questions. Yep.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, you're not helping me here. No, they are. They're helping you work through your own issue, right? Yep, it's the same thing with sales, and it's the same way all the way through. So hopefully that helps everybody, and we'll see everybody next time. And until then, slow down and close more.
Thank you for listening to The Slow Pitch. Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Slow down and close more.
So hopefully that helps everybody. And next time, and just arm wrestle them until you get the deal closed. Next time when they ask you that question, just tell them they're stupid. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are they thinking?
What are
I
you,
don't know the answer.
stupid?
What am I, a lawyer?
I only play one on TV.
That's right. That's right. Thanks as always for listening today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. We really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Slow Pitch. We were mixed today, as always, by Johnny Polakis, and we were produced by High Gravity Studios. Music credits and other notes are in the show notes section on theslowpitch.com, and we'll be back with another episode soon.